Yo, folks. Yo, ho, folks. This is Dragonkeeper 96600 here, and summer is known as a time where a lot of huge blockbuster movies come out, and man, 2017 is not wasting any time. We've already had several huge high-concept movies, and it's not even the summer solstice yet. This week we had Pirates of the Caribbean and Baywatch. Before that, we had Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and this week we have Wonder Woman and Captain America hitting Captain Underpants, sorry, much better superhero, hitting theaters on the same day. What am I supposed to do with all that? So hopefully, considering the influx of summer movies, I'll be doing these movie review videos more often. Hopefully, because, I feel like these aren't the most structured or even the best reviews because I just ramble for almost an hour and give spoilers willy-nilly. I do like talking about movies, and I might as well get some use out of my major. So anyway, let me start off this review by basically telling you two different opinions. One is the critical consensus. Critics hate this movie. The movie in question, in case you didn't read the title, or maybe just because you want me to officially introduce it as part of some kind of reviewer etiquette, is Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. The fifth movie in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, which makes it the second movie after everyone agreed that the franchise should end. Except for the other people who think that it's the fourth movie after the franchise should have ended, but never mind. So critical consensus can basically be boiled down to the opinion I just stated, which is that this franchise has gone on too long and this movie shouldn't exist. I haven't read any of the reviews in detail, but that's basically what the consensus seems to be on Rotten Tomatoes, that this movie shouldn't exist and I'm tired of seeing the same thing. So I have my own issues with the movie. I'm not just dismissing all criticism of this movie as just hating it because it's popular. I feel like it is partly that, because a critic's job is kind of to be, snobbish and highbrow and to look down on what the masses watch. But also, I feel like there are some legit criticisms to this movie. But let me tell you the second opinion of this movie, which is from my dad, who, let me be clear, doesn't have a great track record when it comes to quality movies. As he freely admits himself, he likes stupid movies. He'll freely watch Happy Gilmore or Zoolander, or movies that my mother never could stand, but my dad he likes stupid comedy and mindless action and stuff, but he does have some degree of standard. So I had to go to work right after I saw this movie for the first time yesterday, because I work at the movie theater, and right after the movie ended, it was time for my shift, so I didn't get to talk to my dad until after my shift was over, several hours later. And when I did, my dad was like, "By the way, what'd you think of the movie today?" And I'm like, "Well, I liked it." And he's like, "Honestly, I thought it was really good." And I'm like, "Really?" Because that surprised me a little. He's like, "Yeah, I thought it was way better than the fourth one." And I'm like, "Okay, that's good to know." So there you have it. At least one person, my dad, who didn't like the fourth movie, which nobody seems to like that much, really liked this one. And I can think of a few reasons why he liked it. But first of all, let me just give a rundown of the basic plot, which is never really easy to do with these Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They all tend to have really complicated plots with lots of characters who all have mutually conflicting goals. But never mind. Let me give you the play-by-play like I usually do. So, first off, we meet this little kid, and his name is Henry. And we see him, this is the first scene of the movie. We see him rowing out in the middle of the ocean by himself in a rowboat. And he's got a stack of rocks with him in the boat, and he loops this rope around his legs and drops the rock into the water. It's like, oh my God, we just watch a kid kill himself? But what's actually happening is that this kid, Henry, as some of you who probably watch the TV spots online, is Will Turner's and Elizabeth Swann's son. His name is Henry Turner, and as you recall, his dad, William Turner, is the captain of the Flying Dutchman, the ship that ferries people who died at sea to the other side and can swim underwater. So as soon as he drops, the deck of the Flying Dutchman comes out from underneath him and scoops him back up to the surface, and his dad comes out to talk to him. And I fucking loved that scene in the theater. I hadn't been keeping up with the TV spots and everything. I only saw one trailer in the cinema. So I had no idea that Orlando Bloom was coming back for this movie. I was like, oh my God, it's Will and he's on the Flying Dutchman and here's his kid from the end of At World's End. Oh my God. Okay. And basically, I just love that his dad is so busy being the whole, captain of the plague ship thing, that the only way for him to talk to him was to drown himself. And I like to imagine, Will, he's getting ready and he, does, the creepy voice and he's getting ready to say, do you fear death? But then he sees this kid. He's like, God damn it, Henry. You need to stop doing this. And that's basically what he does. And this is one of the first weird things about this movie. Will has been cursed because he's Captain the Dutchman and he's fish-like now. His face is covered in barnacles. It's not as bad as Jones. He doesn't have a tentacle beard, but he is covered with barnacles. It's very clearly suffering from Dutchman curse or whatever you call it. It's and that was my initial question in the movie, oh my God, why is he cursed? Has he not been doing the job? To ferry souls to the other side, because that's why the crew of the Dutchman gets cursed, is they don't do the, psychopomp job. As you could tell by the speech, I'm a huge Pirates of the Caribbean fan, in case you couldn't tell by the attire. Anyway, what bothered me about this is they never reveal why Will is now fishy. They never... I thought they were gonna say some kind of reason why he hasn't been escorting the dead to the other side, but they never do. It's Will turning fish-like is just treated as a matter of course. Everybody knows this is naturally happening, including Jack, the person who put him in that position by helping him kill Jones in the first place. So I don't know why Jack is all gung-ho about Will being cursed now, but whatever. So basically, Will tells his son, first of all, stop doing this. For real, he actually says that. And he's like, look, son, you need to just move on. I'm the Captain of the Dutchman. I don't want you to be like me, which is a lost cause. Henry is now the product of 3 generations of pirating. That kid's not staying away from the ocean. So Henry vows to break his father's curse by finding this thing called the Trident of Poseidon, which is the latest MacGuffin in a series full of MacGuffins. I think it's been at least one MacGuffin per movie now, at least. So the Trident of Poseidon is supposedly a mythical artifact that can break any curse at sea. The very existence of this thing is also baffling. It's established as being really hard to find, but the existence of this thing kind of cheapens a lot of the conflicts in the previous movies. They're running with the Flying Dutchman, or the cursed crew with Black Pearl in the first movie, or I don't know, any of the stuff, how exactly Blackbeard controls his ship with the thing, or even the villains in this movie. It's all cheapened by the fact that there's this instant magic nullifier that exists somewhere. I get that it's super hard to find, it's at the bottom of the ocean, and its location is revealed in a map that no man can read, and it's repeatedly described that way in the movie, but doesn't it kind of, and I get that the crew of the Black Pearl, returning the coin with the blood is easier to do than to find the trident that no man, on the map that no man can read. But still, the existence of it is oh, well, there was an instant cancel all magic thing out there, so whatever. But anyway, we flash forward from Henry to when he's around, 11, to when he's about 20. And so basically, he's still looking for the Trident. And while he's on this ship, this is the very next scene, by the way, after the flash forward. The title hasn't even rolled at this point yet. Henry is in the Navy and working a thankless below-deck job, turning a wheel, he's Conan the Barbarian or something. And he sees that this ship that they're on is pursuing a pirate ship into this area called the Devil's Triangle. Now, Henry, in an attempt to free his father, has been reading up obsessively over all the various myths and legends over the ocean. And as you can imagine, there are quite a few of them. So, Henry, at least initially, is portrayed as, this super nerd who knows about all these cryptids and, myths and legends and stuff that all these people don't know about. He's wait, we can't go in there. No ship that goes in there ever comes out. And, of course, the Navy doesn't believe him because... well, he acts like a maniac and punched some of the officers. But there is kind of an ongoing running gag with people being skeptical that the supernatural exists, which is kind of out of place. We established, years ago that Pirates of the Caribbean takes place in a world where there's a lot more supernatural stuff just running amok. And, yeah, the fact that the average person wouldn't believe that stuff when the evidence seems around there all the fucking time. I mean, I get that Jack Sparrow himself is kind of an attractor of the strange, but, you know, it seems weird that something that's so common wouldn't be more well-known by people, but whatever. The ship's captain, not happy with a deckhand yammering about cursed triangles and punching his men in the face, has his sleeves ripped for treason. I don't know how historically accurate that is, and locks him in the brig. Meanwhile, they're sailing into the triangle, and lo and behold, the pirate ship that they were chasing has been smashed to smithereens by the crew of a different ship called the Silent Mary. And this is captained by the film's main antagonist, Captain Salazar. And I kind of like Captain Salazar. I'll talk about him more later, but basically I'll continue with the plot summary for now. So he kills everyone on board except for Henry, because he leaves one person alive on every ship he attacks to tell the tale, which is kind of a nice callback all the way to the first movie, where some pirates huddling in a cell are murmuring that the Black Pearl leaves no survivors, and Jack says, "No survivors? Then where do the stories come from, I wonder?" And the guy kind of screws up his face like he's never thought about that before. So the fact that Salazar thinks about this and leaves one person alive so that people will be scared of him is maybe it wasn't intentional, but I thought it was funny. Anyway, and also the other reason he leaves Henry alive besides that is that he notices that Henry has a wanted poster of Jack with him for some reason, because Henry has been researching myths and legends and also looking for the legendary Jack Sparrow, who his parents tell him to stay away from, but he wants to find because he's convinced that this pirate will help him free his dad. And so Salazar has a grudge against Jack Sparrow, like most of the people in the world, and tells Henry, in a really melodramatic way, that death is coming for him. And Henry's like, okay. So while that's happening, we're introduced to this other woman named Karina Smith, and she's a new character too. And she basically the way I can think of it to describe her is if she were a Belle from Beauty and the Beast, but way angrier. Way angrier. She's basically a scientific genius in an era where genius and female are considered to be mutually exclusive categories. So she's been persecuted as a witch her whole life because of that. And when we first meet her, she's actually sentenced to be hanged. But she escapes, and she meets up with Henry, and it turns out she's looking for Poseidon's trident, Also, not to break any kind of curse because she's super science lady and she doesn't believe in curses, but because she's an orphan and she has the map that no man can read. Because it turns out this is a Lord of the Rings style twist, that a woman can read the map, just not a man. And because women are persecuted and not allowed on ships because it's bad luck and not allowed to be geniuses, that's why it's never been found. I guess that's kind of clever, but they never really go anywhere with it. And even my interpretation that only a woman can read the map is never stated outright, because Karina's the navigator, but is it because that she's only, they kind of leave it ambiguous why it is. Is it she's the only one who's studied it obsessively enough? And it's just that no man is smart enough, or no other woman for that matter? Or was it a prediction, a prophecy that no man could read the map because it was a woman destined to do it? I don't know. It's really unclear. But anyway, both of them meet up with Jack, who seems uninterested in Henry's plight until Henry tells him that, he relays Salazar's message that death is coming for him. And then Jack becomes interested in finding the trident to get Salazar off his back. This is pretty typical of the plot structure of Pirates of the Caribbean movies, that every protagonist is cooperating together because they want the same thing, but they all want it for different and selfish reasons. It's, kind of part of the take what you can, give nothing back pirate lore. By the way, Captain Barbossa, remember him, also wants the trident because, if you recall at the end of the fourth movie, and you might not a whole lot of people recall anything about the fourth movie, Barbossa got a hold of the Queen Anne's Revenge and Blackbeard's magic ship-controlling staff. So apparently he has been using that power to basically tame the seas. So he's got a fleet with 10 ships, and you see his main ship, which I guess is the Queen Anne's Revenge, though I don't think it's ever named, and he's sitting in the captain's cabin. Basically, it's Tamatoa's dream. He's surrounded in gold. He's dressed in a white powdered wig, even though he's not a privateer anymore. He's got, like, the lavish. He's got his personal orchestra playing for him, and he's eating Turkish delight with a pair of tweezers. It's, like, really disgusting, like, Saudi prince level opulence. It's just like, wow. But he is willing to go and make a deal with Salazar at first, to give him Jack so he'll stop destroying his ships. But then he joins up with the rest of them to hunt the Trident to get rid of Salazar, who is becoming a real problem. Salazar and his crew are undead. And they seem to be like the most invulnerable antagonists so far. Like I don't think only at the end do they have the straight, like, one-on-one crew-to-crew fight with Salazar, because his men are even more impervious to damage than the crews of the Cursed Black Pearl or the Dutchmen were. They don't seem capable of sustaining any kind of wounds, and a lot of them have visible holes in their bodies. Like, there's one guy who's, like, there's just his torso is gone, and there's, like, one guy who's, like, the top of his head has been severed from here. And there's another guy who is basically nothing but a hat and an arm and a leg. And I do kind of like the explanation why they all look like that, because when you first meet them, they're all, like, have body parts missing, and they're, like, Captain Salazar's hair is, like, floating around his face, like he's constantly underwater, and they don't explain right away why they look like that. But they reveal it in flashback, and it's kind of cool, but I'll get to it in a bit. So basically, it's your classic find the thing to save the day plot. They have to sail to find Poseidon's trident and use it to break the curse, but Salazar also wants it because it turns out Poseidon's trident will enable the user to control the sea. Okay, it kind of makes sense because Poseidon is the god of all the oceans, but it makes me think the ocean is really fucking easy to control in Pirates of the Caribbean, isn't it? I mean, Beckett was able to seize control of it by holding Davy Jones's heart hostage. Apparently, the original pirate brethren sealed Calypso away, so that would enable them to control the sea. So you'd think that now that Calypso was free, the sea would be a lot harder to control, but I guess not. And now this Poseidon trident thingy can control the sea. It's like, the sea gets conquered more often than fucking Hyrule. Like, Jesus, it's a lot of fucking water. Why is it so easy to command all of it? But whatever. So you can already guess a few of the issues I have with this movie. First of all is its plot. Plot is really simple. Surprisingly, also at the same time, kind of convoluted, but its main problem seems to be it's rehashing a lot of what previous movies have done. Like, it's almost like they're going down a checklist. It's kind of baffling. We have an undead pirate crew led by a captain who can walk through solid objects and is immune to all physical damage and has a grudge against Captain Jack Sparrow. Also, we have the young, naive guy whose father was a pirate who wants to free his said pirate father from a curse. We have the strong female lead who's ahead of her time and constantly exasperated with the boorish behavior of the pirates all around her. We have Jack being a washout that nobody takes seriously anymore. We have a MacGuffin that's needed to break a curse and that everyone is after. I think I already mentioned that, but whatever. And we have a mystical something hidden at the bottom of a constellation that you have to follow because the constellation points to an island on the horizon where the thing is hidden that you need to save the day. Oh, come on! That wasn't even from a pirate movie. Disney's ripping off Disney movies from other Disney franchises. Why would, like, as soon as they said, oh, it's like, okay, so Karina finds out that she needs to read the map only by the light of a blood moon. insert Breath of the Wild joke here. And then she finds out that the constellation on the front, which looks like a trident, points to an island where she will find the entrance of the place where she needs to find the trident. It's like, oh my god. Before you can get the trident, you have to sail to the entrance of Lalatai and retrieve the magical fish hook that allows you to transform into anything. It's like, okay, so not the most original plot. And more than that, there's also a lot of plot holes. Like, apparently this movie has writers that didn't, like, the first 4 movies were all written by the same people. This movie has different writers. So you could tell that they like Pirates of the Caribbean, but they make mistakes and maybe have a different vision of it than the original writers did. They turned that the wrong way. Okay, so one thing that some people pointed out is that there are a few things that are left unanswered. Like I already mentioned, why is Will cursed to look fishy now? They never explain that. See, there was more. I'm thinking. Oh, yeah. Remember Angelica from the last movie? She isn't brought up again, which especially pisses me off because Angelica was a really cool character. Penelope Cruz, hello. And apparently she's still on that island because nobody ever mentions her. Especially weird because Javier Bardem, the guy who plays Salazar, is married to Penelope Cruz in real life. So you think he'd bring up once, like, is my wife supposed to be in this movie? But I guess not. There's also, this movie has an extended flashback where it's revealed how Jack became captain of a ship called the Wicked Wench and how he received his compass from the previous captain of the Wicked Wench who was dying and named Jack captain. So... yeah, it's a cool scene and all, and it's cool that the ship that he became captain of was called the Wicked Wench, which is a reference to the original prequel novels by Disney, which explained the Wicked Wench was a ship that was sunk, and then Jack asked Davy Jones to resurrect it for him and name him captain, which is, how he ended up owing him his soul 13 years later. The thing about that is, though, the dying guy gives him the compass and warns Jack never to betray it, and it's like a really deep moment. It's supposed to be a, foundational moment for Jack's personality, except, and I didn't realize this until after I'd gotten home from the movie and read it on Tumblr, in the second movie, they say that Jack got the compass from Tia Dalma. Like, she has a line like, the compass you bartered from me, it cannot lead you to this. So we got the compass from Tia, not the captain guy. And it's like, oh, I hate it when films do that. I get that these movies are long and sitting through them is hard and that there's a lot of plot things and references and it's hard for a new writer to keep up with, but come on. You could at least read up on the wiki a little bit before you write your compass as such an important plot detail. And the way the compass is utilized is really baffling to me. So apparently the compass, as you know, probably if you've seen the previous films, will point in the direction of the thing you want the most in this world. Fair enough. They also say, though, if you betray the compass, meaning give it away, it will unleash your worst fear. And this is how Captain Salazar is freed from the Devil's Triangle, because he wasn't able to leave it until Jack traded the compass for rum, because he had no money and he was really drunk, even drunker than he is normally. And so... there are so many things that confuse me about this. First of all, Captain Salazar is Jack's worst fear? Really? He didn't even know his name. I already told you how Captain, when Henry tells him about Salazar, Jack looks scared, but he says, I once knew a captain named something Spanish. If he's your worst fear, then remember his fucking name. And another thing is, how did Captain Salazar know that the compass would free him? How did he know about the compass at all? He never actually met Jack face to face. He only saw him on a different ship. And he seemed to know that the compass would free him. It's what? Yeah, there's... okay, and another thing about plot is, I mentioned already that there's a plot that Jack is a washout that nobody takes seriously. He tries to pull off a heist at the beginning of the movie and it fails epically. So his crew leaves him in disgust. His crew consists of 5 people and they're all camping out in a ship called the Dying Gull. I'm dead serious. The Dying Gull that is permanently beached and doesn't seem capable of making it out to sea. It's basically a pile of driftwood held together with duct tape and hope. And so they ditch Jack and he has nothing to his name and he's even drunker than normal in the scene where we first meet him. And he basically has nothing to his name, which is great. But even that plot is overused because washout that nobody takes seriously is what Jack was like when we first met him all the way back in Curse of the Black Pearl. He didn't have a Black Pearl anymore. He introduced himself as captain despite not having a crew. Norrington called him the worst pirate he'd ever heard of. It's supposed to be a low point in Jack's life when he doesn't have his pearl. His pearl is still in a bottle that he keeps in his jacket, by the way, because it turns out getting a goat and wiggling your fingers at it, it wasn't enough to free the pearl. But whatever. So it's like, even that plot of people getting sick of the hero is overused, which is especially weird because this is a point where in the franchise where most people are sick of the heroes. So having that be used as a plot device is sort of a subversive thing is not working because that's kind of what Jack is. He's a loser. That's what he's been from day one. And reestablishing Jack is a loser now. It's like, Jack was a loser always. And that and the exposition is sometimes clumsy. When we first meet Karina, she's being asked to confess by the priest, and she basically gives away her name, her backstory, and her motivation in that moment. It's really heavy-handed. She's like, I confess that I am a woman of silence and not a witch, because she's being condemned as a witch. I confess that I will not stop until I have solved this map and found the secret of who I am, that I was orphaned on a door, and I will use this to reconnect with my mysterious father that I don't know. And she says all this out loud. And it's really, really not. Oh God, it's heavy-handed. There's also another baffling turn is that Karina is being convicted as a witch. But it turns out while they're doing that, while the British Navy is doing that, they also have an actual, honest-to-God, rat-eating, green slime-drinking, cursing your enemies witch, a real witch named Shansa that they're keeping in a dungeon, and they consult for supernatural matters. Well, you clearly know the difference between a witch and a real, and a woman who's interested in science. Is this just an excuse to persecute women? That would be an interesting plot point if anything came of it, but instead it's just weirdly inconsistent. And apparently this witch is someone Barbossa knows. Barbossa needs to stop hanging out with witches. Because this was also dumped really heavy-handedly. Apparently he saved her from something, and so now she curses his enemies for him. And she says this thing about how she there's a price of blood for crossing her door and all this stuff. It's who are you? Throughout the movie, I kept calling her not Tia because she's basically Tia Dalma, but not as cool and without the established backstory or personality, and nonsensical in her existence. Why is the British Navy keeping this woman in custody and not hanging her? And I don't understand. It's especially baffling because Jack gives away his compass and thus freeing Salazar, and he gives it away to the barman. By the way, the scene where he gives it away also makes no sense because he puts it on the table I'll trade you for this. And then the whole bar starts rumbling as miles away, Salazar is freed from the Devil's Triangle and the ground crumbles and the sunlight shines and on Salazar for the first time in presumably decades, and they sail away vowing revenge and all this stuff. And while the table is rumbling ominously, Jack reaches for the compass, and the bartender quickly takes it and throws it on a stash of knickknacks that he has. It's wait, so the minute he set that thing down, it caused tremors, and you want it? What kind of bartender are you? Yeah, so basically, Jack gave away the compass, right? Barbossa goes to see Shansa's who's sinking my ships? And she's it's Salazar. I don't remember exactly what she told him. I actually saw this movie yesterday, so it's not as fresh in my mind. But basically, she's you can find you'll recover the treasure that you lost. Not that he stole from you, though he does consult her about his missing treasure. You'll recover the treasure that you lost if you follow this compass. And she hands the compass to him that Jack traded away. And Barbossa's how did you get this? And she's I have my ways. And I'm you're not even I slept with him to get it? Nothing? How did she get it? Who cares? It's so lazy. So I bitch and moan about this movie a lot. But I actually do like it. And I acknowledge part of that is because I'm a Pirates of the Caribbean fan, so I'm willing to excuse things, and I'm more invested in the characters than I would be normally. But where I feel like this movie succeeds, especially specifically where the writing for this movie succeeds, is not in the plot, but in the comedy. And Pirates of the Caribbean has always kind of been... I wouldn't call the movies comedies, but they've always had funny moments. And earlier movies, especially 1 through 3 and 4, had this particular style of humor where it was like sort of intellectual, but not really. Like, they'd argue about, like, the proper pronunciation of Kraken, or, like, one of my favorite jokes was, like, when Tia Dalma asks, oh, what vexes all men? And each of the men has a different answer. Like, Gibbs says the sea, Pintel says sums, and Rigetti says the dichotomy of good and evil. Like, like, that's the kind of humor I'm talking about. It's kind of highbrow. It's making fun of how dumb people are, but also using, like, these jokes that are, like, clearly some thought was put into them. Dead Men Tells No Tales has a brand of humor that's, like, much more... like classic comedy, like, you know, it involves like witty one-liners and repertoire and like jokes that are more, I think, easily available to a general audience. That said, they are good jokes. There's one particular scene I like where, so basically, in a nutshell, Salazar is after Jack, and Jack and Karina are with Henry in a boat, and they're trying to make it to an island because guess what? Captain Salazar's crew, everyone say it with me, cannot set foot on dry land. God damn it. Stop rehashing stuff from previous movies. So Karina jumps off and starts taking off her huge padded Victorian dress. She's like, I'm going to make it swim for it. And Jack has several great lines in a row in this scene. He's like, first of all, he goes, how dare you do exactly what I would do in this situation? And then, she sees, you know, she starts disrobing, and Henry's like, wait, don't go, don't jump in the water. And Jack is like, no, jump in the water, because of course she's disrobing. And then Henry's like, this has gone, that's far enough. And Jack is like, no, it is not nearly far enough. And then she takes off her dress, so she's just in her underdress, which is still most clothing than women wear, which is still like less clothing than women wear on the outside today, but in those days it's considered practically naked. She jumps in the water, and like Henry immediately changes from like, the like anxious, don't do it, we'll find another way tone to, I saw her ankles. Like, he was so excited about that. And Jack is like, we'd have seen a lot more if you kept your kegels shut. And and so after things turning sour, Henry decides he's going to do the same thing and jump in the water after Karina. And Jack is like, you're leaving me for some horologist in her knickers? And Henry's like, yes. And Jack is like, you men are all alike. And that line made me giggle. Not only because Johnny Depp, I'm pretty sure, confirmed that Jack is bi, but also just he sounded so indignant. And just the way he said it was really funny. I mentioned the failed heist at the beginning of the movie. Basically, it's that it's St. Martin, which is a real island, by the way. And there's Jack and the crew of the Black Pearl. They're not on the crew of the Dying Gull are trying to rob a bank. Okay, so basically there's this like uppity British guy who's like introducing this new vault that the bank has. He says it's 5 inches, made of steel, 5 inches thick, it's impenetrable, nobody can ever get in this vault. And keep in mind, as he's saying this, we haven't seen Jack on screen yet. And he's like, no one can ever rob the British Empire. St. Martin's treasury is now safe forever. And as I'm saying this, you already know what the fucking punchline is, so everybody say it now. Okay, time's up. You all just said he opens the door and Jack is already inside, because of course that's what the fucking punchline is. And normally that would be too obvious to get a laugh. If the joke had stopped there, it would be like he swings open the door and Jack is inside. But this time it works, because Jack is so stinking drunk that he's asleep when they open it, and he stands up, and he doesn't remember. Not only does he not remember how he got inside the vault, he doesn't remember why he's there, or what time it is, or who all these people are pointing guns at him. And then it gets even better when a woman sits up behind him and behind the safe, and then it gets even better when the uppity guy orders them to shoot regardless of the woman, and one of his assistants points out, that's your wife. And he's like, Francis? In like this most hurt tone possible. And she like hastily gets up, like readjusting her dress and stuff, and like that's funny because it kept snowballing and getting worse and worse. Like it went past the obvious joke and like kept going until it became the single most humiliating moment in the history of St. Martin, and probably St. Martin has a long tumultuous history that would make that sentence untrue and unfortunate because control of the island is currently split between two different nations, but that's another story. So anyway, basically this opening scene with Bank Heist is one that made me think, after the initial scenes with Henry and Salazar, that this movie had a real chance of me liking it. Because the basic plan is for the crew of the Dying Gull to hook a pair of chains to the safe and pull it. And I guess the plan was that the team of horses would pull the safe through the wall of the wooden wall of the bank, and they drag it off. What happens is that the safe gets stuck, and they end up dragging the entire bank. So there's this huge, long, extended chase sequence where they're dragging a bank through the streets of St. Martin, and it's hilarious, and it's amazingly over the top. That said, not every joke in the movie works. There are a few groaners. There's one where during this scene, in the commotion, Karina is escaping being hanged while the heist is going on, and she ducks into, I think it's an observatory. Like, there's, like, star charts around, and there's a huge telescope. She's like, wow, because, she's been studying the stars her whole life to solve the math from her father that she's never met. Blah, blah, blah. So she, like, looks through it, and in broad daylight, she's, like, adjusting it, and this guy comes downstairs, and he looks at her and he's like, no woman has ever handled my Herschel. So stupid. But after that, there's a scene where she's offering to buy a pocket watch. She calls it a chronometer because she's an insufferable nerd. And she says, I'll pay you double to sell to a woman. And he starts hysterically screaming that there's a witch just because she looked through a telescope and knows about star charts, which he does every day, and she's better at him than it, but because she knows things and she's a woman, witch. So that's when Jack stumbles in, and and then he's like, the guy's like screaming, help, there's a witch in my store. And then Jack walks in, and he's like, and a pirate! There's a witch and a pirate in my store. And Jack is like, remember, completely fucking stoned drunk. Jack is like, oh, that is your lucky day. Have either of the four of you seen my bank? I thought it was funny. So I think you could see what the humor being like more lowbrow. Like, Pirates of the Caribbean always had like sex jokes and like jokes about like falling in pig shit and stuff. But like this movie, when I say lowbrow, I mean like jokes that are like more easily accessible to like children. And not exactly of the how do you pronounce Kraken kind of variety of humor. There's the crew of the Dying Gull has an extended routine with Karina where she's trying to explain to them what she does, and when she says that she's a horologist, they only pick up on the first syllable of that word. And and she mentions that she's an astronomer, and one of the pirates like goes, I know what that means. It means she farms donkeys. She's like, what? No, there's no donkey. And he's like, then how do you breed them? She's like, I don't breed donkeys. Like, it's way better, and it's stupid in the film, but it's actually really funny. So that's one place where I think the movie succeeds is the comedy. Despite a few groaners, it remains funny after all. The other part where I think it succeeds is the action. I mentioned the heist where they steal a whole bank. They don't fight Salazar's crew as much because his crew is indestructible, and there's one scene where someone tries to shoot one of his crew, but he shoots through the massive hole in his mouth and chest, and he ends up hitting one of his own crewmates right behind him. And First of all, I'm not sure why he thought shooting through the hole would be work, but that's kind of indicative of how invulnerable these guys are. But there's still some cool action with the Silent Mary. The Silent Mary itself has a huge hole blown out of the hull, and it's still able to float despite this. And how it attacks other ships is really fascinating. It like rears up, and the ribs holding that would normally hold together, but just look like skeletal ribs, spread open wide, and then it like fucking does the McRib chomp on the other ship, and it's seen like barreling over ships by doing that. So it's a ship that eats the other ships. It's weird, but it looks cool. Salazar and his crew themselves look really cool. Like, Salazar actually kind of has a texture to him. Like, maybe it's that black goo comes out of his mouth when he talks, or maybe he's got this ashy, whispery quality to his voice, or along the cracks running along his cheek, or the way his hair is, like, always floating. But it seems like if you touched him, it would feel gross. Like, that's the sensation I got from it. Especially the hair. Like, it's like if you pick up a hairball from, like, the carpet floor and it's all like soft and wispy and it feels like it's crawling on your skin even though it's not moving. Like, it looks like it would feel like that. The trident itself also looks kind of cool, and so does the island that they find under the constellation. And yeah, all of these movies are visually cool still. Like, maybe it's just my personal taste, but I really like the whole pirate aesthetic with the ships and the people dressed in, like, rags, but rags that were stolen from, like, rich people. And, like, you know, the sea shanties and the glittering treasure and, like, the sea creatures and the weird supernatural shit. Like, I'm a sucker for all of that. Like, I don't know if it's possible to, like, be a fan of something purely for aesthetic, but here we are. The characters themselves are kind of enjoyable, and this is where some people are split, because some people are sick of Jack Sparrow and find Salazar to be a boring antagonist, and are sick of basically the character types that Henry and Karina represent, because they're like the attractive white couple that, you know, get together in a lot of these Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Like, first it was Will and Elizabeth, then it was what's-his-face and that mermaid in the fourth one, and now it's these two. But I honestly like them. I like how exasperated Karina is constantly. Like, she knows exactly what time period she's in and how she's treated. And there's an extent to when she's used of it, but when they're about to hang her, she uses her last words to basically insult everyone's intelligence because she's so fed up with living in this time period. Then I kind of like Henry. Henry is like basically Will, but he's less stoic than Will. Like, he's like how Will was early on. Except, like, the first scene where I really liked him was the scene I already mentioned where he's like, I saw her ankles. Like, he's not usually that excited, but that was that was a really charming moment to me. Like, I get it, like, there's an ongoing running gag that men are pervs, Pirates of the Caribbean, but in that moment it worked for me. There's also the scene where, like, Henry obviously knows the supernatural is real because his dad is the captain of the Flying Dutchman and he had to drown himself to meet him. But Karina, for some reason, doesn't believe in the supernatural. And so, like, they have this argument, like, you know, I say myths exist. No, they don't. You're stupid. We're being hunted by undead pirates right now. Shut your mouth. But then when they get to the island and she sees indisputable proof that ghosts are real with these guys running around who are just limbs and a floating hat and, like, have huge holes blown in their mouths, she, like, screams, "Ghosts!" and she runs for the island, which is the best reaction anyone could have. Like, in the face of the undeniable evidence, I have determined the best course of action is to get the fuck out of here. I like Salazar himself, too. Like, he isn't as well developed as some other antagonists, like Barbossa or Jones. But he does have his moments of charm. Like, you've probably seen the moment in the trailer where he, like, asks Henry to relay his message, death, to Jack, and he follows up with a very earnest, please. And it's cute. And I like the scene where the curse is freed, I already mentioned. And when he feels the sunlight for the first time, he, like, holds up his hands and, like, basks in it for a minute. And he looks really happy, and it's cute. part of it is probably the charisma of Javier Bardem, who was an Academy Award nominated actor. He was Anton in No Country for Old Men, which is like a really good movie and a really hard role to pull off. And he's, he just brings a lot of charm to the character. I'm going to talk a little bit more about more spoilery things now. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and this review has made you interested in seeing it, stop watching now. Otherwise, you can keep going. So basically, I'm going to talk about the twist in this movie. So remember Karina has the dad that she doesn't know. So I was like running through a list of candidates in my mind, like, could her dad be someone we know? For a second, I was wondering, is Jack her dad? Like, Jack has banged a lot of women, like, and she seems the right age for it. Like, turns out that's not the case. I'm just gonna go ahead and blurt it. Barbosa is Karina's dad. And I was not... The scene where he, like, first meets her, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm finding the island based on this book that I have. And he, like, looks at it, and it's like... And Mappy's like, that map was stolen from a Spanish sailor. And she's like, no, it was given to me by my father. And he, like, his face starts going white. He's like, there used to be a ruby on it, right? She's like, yeah, how do you know? And he's like, I've heard of it. Like, I don't remember what the full conversation was, but it becomes slowly more apparent over the course of it that Barbosa is the parent. And there's, like, the one scene that gave it away. She's like, Karina's unusual. He's like, what are you called? She's like, I name myself after the brightest star in the north. And he's like, that would be Karina, right? She's like, yeah, how do you know? And he's like, oh, I've studied the heavens. It's like, oh my God. The whole time this was happening on screen, me being the Pirates of the Caribbean fangirl I was basically like, no, no way. And Jack, this is, like, a lot of the character-based humor that I really like in Pirates of the Caribbean, but, like, Jack is, like, tied to the mast, and he's listening to this conversation, and he's like... And it's obvious to Jack what's obvious to the audience. Karina is the spawn of Barbosa, and he's like, so, catching up with your kid, huh? Or, like, something like that, and Barbosa runs up to him like, shh! Because he doesn't want Karina to know that he's his dad. So, apparently, Barbosa, being the stellar guy that it is, dropped Karina off at an orphanage because he didn't feel like he'd make the best dad. Understandable, but still kind of weird that this family member has come out of nowhere. Apparently, Karina's mother's name was Margaret, but we don't know much else about her. One thing I want to know is, did she ever go deaf? Because we've seen how Barbosa thinks you talk to someone you're in love with. And so it involves a lot of shouting. So I wonder if her hearing blew out ever. But so I forgot where I was going with this. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And it's just weird that this came out of nowhere. That Barbosa has a long-lost daughter plot. I'm not sure, like, why there are so many I can't find my dad plots in this movie. The other plot I want to mention is Salazar's backstory, and I do want to talk a little bit about that. So Salazar has this grudge against Jack, and he's made it seem like he and Jack are personal enemies. That's actually not the case. What happened is that Salazar, when he was human and had blood, was a Spanish pirate hunter who has this psychotic hatred of pirates because his dad and his granddad were murdered by pirates. Fair enough. And he's, like, really sadistic about it, too. Like, he, like, sinks the ships, and then when the pirates are helpless in the water, he orders his men to fire on them. And in what is obviously supposed to be a kick-the-dog movement. So he's hunting them outside of the Devil's Triangle until only the wicked wench is left. So the dying captain names Jack captain, and Jack basically does what Jack does best and pisses off Salazar. That's what Jack does best. He pisses off his enemies. So he makes for the Devil's Triangle. Salazar follows behind, and then Jack uses his gambit. He, like, tosses an anchor out of the wicked wench, and he uses it to swing around pull off basically a hard turn to starboard to port that no ship could pull off by just turning the wheel, and basically turns away from the triangle while the Silent Mary, Salazar's ship, slides right in. So what happens when you hit the Devil's Triangle is this crevice opened up underneath the ship, and and hellfire came out, and the ship exploded. And so the reason the men have like are all ashy and have chunks of their bodies missing, and there's one guy who's only a floating hat and an arm, is because they all sustained the wounds they had when they died from an explosion. So they're basically walking around like giant explosion corpses. And Salazar's hair is always floating because he was thrown out of the ship by the blast and landed in the water and died there. So it looks like he's constantly drowning because he's got his hair flying away like this. And I thought that was a really cool reveal of why they look like that, because at first, like, you meet them and it's like, why do they look like this? Because in the first movie, you didn't see that they were freaky. The scene where it's revealed that the crew of the Black Pearl is freaky looking is the same scene where it's explained why they look like that. In this movie, we see the crew interacting, we see their weird powers and properties and stuff before finding out why, and then we find out why, it's like, oh, that's why. Ooh, that's creepy. But it sort of felt like a thud because Salazar was built up as Jack's worst fear and his personal foe and all this stuff, and it turns out that they just made eye contact from across the sea. And Salazar remembers the young man perched on the mast like a sparrow who taunted him, but, it's basically built him to this hard revenge of this hard grudge against this guy he barely knows. The climactic fight at the end with Salazar as they're rushing for the Trident also seems kind of anticlimactic, because it's like, well, they haven't had a whole lot of face-to-face confrontations. It seems a little too early for this. Oh, we're 2 hours in. I kind of had that thought process, like, we're 2 hours into this movie, and yet it still feels too early for the villain and Jack to go at it. Because there isn't much personal interaction for them to go off on. One last thing I want to talk about before I wrap this up, because this review was already really long, is the ending of the movie. Now, in the end, it turns out that Karina read the words on this map that says, to conquer the seas, one must divide, or like something like that. One must divide. It turns out one must divide refers to you have to break the Trident in order to break every curse at sea. Not sure why that pun wasn't utilized. Breaking the Trident breaks the curse. It seems obvious, but no, they went with divide. And Karina and Henry correctly interpret that as break it. So, okay. So basically, Will's curse is lifted. And after they defeat the bad guy and sail away, Henry has this reunion where the Dutchman comes out to meet him and it's all shiny and gold again like it was at the end of Outworld's End. And Will is human again, and he's so proud, and he's like, Henry, how'd you do it? And he's like, I'll tell you, because I'm alive and I can now. And he's got Karina with him, and they introduce him, and then they go to shore, and who runs up to meet them but Elizabeth, all the way from the third movie. And unfortunately, Keira Knightley doesn't have any lines, but I wasn't expecting Elizabeth to be in this movie at all, so when I saw her, I was like, oh! Because I'm a fan and I care. And she runs up to Will, and they embrace, and they're a happy family, and Jack is watching through the telescope, and he's like, revolting. And then they sail away to a new adventures with a newly restored Pearl once again. So it feels like this show, and taking the Pearl away and restoring it to Jack constantly. It's going in rotation. It's like, will you let him keep the Pearl now, please? I mean, goodness. And don't try to curse Will again with that fish shit, because we thought he was rid of that already. And does the Dutchman need a captain now to ferry souls to the other side? Why wasn't Will doing the other job? When he came to pick up Henry at the beginning, was he actually still doing his job then? If so, why was he blah, 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 blah. There are hints that they may be answered in the post-credits scene. Now, every Pirates of the Caribbean movie has a post-credits scene, but this is the only movie that gives a serious hint of what might be in the next movie. Now, I have heard that there are trailers for this movie advertising that it's the final adventure. That's what they said. The final adventure begins and stuff like that. I sincerely hope that's not the case because of this end credits scene. First of all, Dead Man Tells No Tales doesn't seem like a strong enough note to end the franchise on. Like, At World's End would have been a good place to end it, in my opinion. But if we're at Dead Man's Tell No Tale, we might as well keep going, because I'm going to tell you what the end credit scene, for those of you who walked out before it aired. Basically, Will and Elizabeth, both human and finally together, are in bed together, and they're both asleep. Their door creaks open, and a very familiar silhouette walks through the door, and it turns out it's the unmistakable tentacled form of Davy Jones himself in their fucking bedroom. It's like, Bill Nye, get out of my bedroom. So, like, he stands ominously at their bed, he raises his crab claw in the air, Will sits up, and then Will, back in bed, opens his eyes because it was a dream. Or was it? Because Will looks at the door anxiously, goes back to sleep, and then it pans under the bed, and it shows there are a couple of barnacles lying there in a pool of water, and the music box is playing. End. Go to black, lights up, time to clean the theater. And that scene left me like, oh! Davy Jones is my favorite Pirates of the Caribbean character, so the implication that he might be back is enough by itself to get me to come back for the sixth one. And I get what they're trying to do. Like, well, the franchise is kind of dead. And, you know, a lot of people are sick of it, but maybe if we brought back, like, more specific callbacks to previous movies, like, I don't mean in terms of plot structure, but I mean in, like, terms of, like, referencing what happened in previous movies and bringing back the most popular characters, then maybe we can get interest back up again just in the terms of nostalgia or anything. And you know what? I'm enough of a sucker that I'll buy it. I feel like there's a lot of you could do with a Davy Jones comes back plot. I'm not sure where they'd go with it. I honestly don't know. But if it helps explain why Will is cursed again, and honestly, if we get to hear that accent again, I'll fucking take it. I don't care. I saw one review of this movie that, like, had the question, is anyone, like, the reviewer was, like, obviously exasperated with the sheepishness of American consumers. And he's like, is anyone honestly still excited by these characters in this setting? And that's when I go, yes, I is. I'm a dirty blackguard. What can I say? I'll never change. But, so we have that. So I don't know why they put such an obvious sequel hook and then had trailers advertise the final adventure. Some people have interpreted that scene as just a hallucination of, like, Will having post-traumatic stress disorder from all the stuff that he suffered throughout the movies. I don't think so. I think the shot of it lingering on the barnacles with the music box is enough to indicate that that's not it. And if it is it, that's a weird note to end the franchise on. So I really, really hope there's another movie, just so I don't lie awake at night wondering, why is he not dead? Or was he dead? Just tearing myself inside out. But there's a lot of great lines and subplots and scenes that I didn't mention because I want to stop this review and I don't want to just recap the whole movie. And we're almost at an hour's length and I need to chill. But basically, I feel like if you're a fan, there are a few continuity errors and snarls that will piss you off, but otherwise you'll really like this. If you're not a fan, give it a chance and see what you think. But I understand if you don't feel like giving it a chance because there's been a lot of pirate movies and people are sick. Some people are sick of them, and I understand that. Like I said, I work at a theater, and a lot of the people who are coming out, their reactions seem mixed. Like, some people are like, man, it's just the same thing over and over. Like, I heard one woman saying that out loud, and there are some people who are like, that was so good. I liked it so much. And, you know, you'll be either or. I personally don't care if you like this movie. It won't, like, there's some movies that, like, people don't like. And I'm like, what? How could you not like this movie? I understand if you don't like this one. But I liked it a lot, and I feel like there's enough in it that a lot of other people will like it too. So in the end, Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man Tells No Tales is clumsy, but fun. And I feel like it's a good way to... it's a good entry in 2017's summer blockbuster lineup. So hopefully there will be a film review for either Captain Underpants or Wonder Woman. Most likely Captain Underpants because I don't really know enough about Wonder Woman as a franchise to comment on it meaningfully. But anyway, I hope that more movie reviews will come for the rest of the summer. And I hope you enjoy this review. This is the Dragon Keeper 96600 signing off.